Welcome to the Water People podcast, where we talk story with some of the most adept water folk on the planet. I'm your host, Lauren Hill, joined by my partner, Dave Rastovich. For us, this show is about sharing the aquatic experiences that shape who we become back on land. This season is supported by Patagonia, whose purpose-driven mission is to use business to save our home planet. We acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters where we work and play, who have cared for this sea country for tens of thousands of years. Respect and gratitude to all First Nations people, including elders past, present, and emerging. Today we're in conversation with surfer and coach Belen Alvarez Kimble, one of the longboarding icons of the Blue Crush era that saw the resurgence of women to many lineups around the world. Belen occupied one of the very few positions as a professional free surfer through the early 2000s and worked with surf brands as an ambassador for unifying women's surfing around the globe. Belen grew up in a traditional Mexican household in Southern California, her mother a first-generation immigrant. Today she resides in northern New South Wales, where she's the owner and operator of Salty Girls Surf School. When I look back on my own childhood in reflecting on parenting, there's one moment from my teenagehood that makes me terrified of having a teenager more than anything else. And that was when I was in my middle teens, maybe 15 or 16. My boyfriend at the time, his little sister, who was maybe 4 or 5 years younger than us, she and her mom, my boyfriend's mom, I don't know how I got invited with them, but they were planning a trip to Europe and they invited me to go along because the little sister and I guess, were acquainted well enough. And so they invited me and I was obsessed. I was not going to take no for an answer. This, despite the fact that I was living in a single parent home, my mom, working so hard, working multiple jobs. I had no concept of money, of how expensive a trip like that would be, going from the East Coast to Europe and traveling for, I don't know, I think 2 weeks or something. I am embarrassed about how I treated my mom now, and I'm terrified of how Manoa is going to be as a strong-willed teenager because I would not let it go. We would be having dinner, we would be making breakfast in the morning. As soon as she got home from work, as soon as she would wake me up in the morning, she'd come into my room, she'd turn on my TV because that was how I woke up every single morning. My mom would turn on a TV that was in my room. And I would sit up and I'd say, Mom, how about Europe? Can I go to Europe? Can I please go to Europe? Can I please go to Europe? Mom, please, can I go? Can I go? I really want to go. Please, Mom, please let me go. Let me go. I was relentless. It's so terrifying when I think about having a child who behaves that way now. I've got that coming for me. I would not take no for an answer. And somehow my sweet, sweet, generous mother scraped the funds together and sent me to Europe with my friend's family. And I had an amazing adventure and got to have these formative experiences of other cultures. We went through 5 or 6 different countries, got to hear other languages, eat different cuisines. And I really knew from that point that I wanted to adventure out in the world. I don't know what it was in me that was so keen on getting out of my small town. I think maybe it was genetic. My mom left her hometown in the coal mining mountains of Pennsylvania, she says, on the back of a motorcycle. When she was 18, she hit the road. My dad spent a lot of time overseas. His dad was in the U.S. military, and so they lived in France and in Hawaii and in different parts of the U.S. Anyway, that was my first real taste of Europe, and man, I've never gotten enough. And so I tell this story because in this conversation with Belen, she talks about how she was desperate to start surfing and her family said no. We were talking about when was a time in our own lives when we refused to take no for an answer and where did that lead us? And so, yeah, my recollection of just battling my poor mom. It felt like months. It was probably just a few weeks. She relented and I did not. And I'm ashamed of that. But But anyway, it got me to Europe and it made me fall in love with travel and seeing the world. What about you?
That is formative, yeah.
Do you have a story like that?
Yeah, my parents weren't blocking of any of my interests really as a kid. I wanted a drum kit and they never got me that. And I had a lot of music in me as a young boy, but we were a sporting family, so I didn't get too many no's from the family there. But I do recall as a young teenager surfing at Burleigh Heads on the Gold Coast in the 90s. Burleigh was a very localized spot, a lot of testosterone, not many women, if any at all, in the lineup ever. A pretty powerful wave too, and so that was reflected in the male culture that lived and dominated there. And everyone pretty much at that point was riding pointy-nose thrusters, so very specific type of surfboard that creates a specific type of surfing. I was a young upstart coming up and winning a few contests and had sponsorship from Billabong and other companies with surfing and all heading towards the pro surfing gravy train. And all of a sudden I'm hanging out with Dick Van Stralen. And when my dad sort of went off the rails as a pretty rocky time in his life, Dick Van really stepped in as a stable mentor and as someone who really supported my creative side and just everything in life. He's just got a wide open perspective to art of all kinds. And so we at that time were hanging out in his shaping bay in the afternoons where there wasn't any surf. I would just ride my bike to his shaping bay, sit down, listen to classical music, and we'd dream up different surfboard shapes together. And one day there was a scrap piece of foam in the corner that had been cut out from a paddle board outline. And so it was 5 foot long and had a little curve to it already. And we kind of jokingly said, hey, look, you could turn that into a surfboard of some sort. Just stick a few fins on it and away you go. And so he did. And what came out was a 411 stringerless little epoxy glass and styrofoam core surfboard. I started riding this thing at Burleigh and it was so little and so different to everything everyone was riding at that point. And I loved it. I could go so far back in the tube and control this board so easily because it was so little and had so much flex because it didn't have a stringer that I was just in heaven. I had my own universe going on, but the culture around me was not stoked. And a number of the older surfers who were probably just late teens and early 20-year-olds really felt like I was jeopardizing my chance of becoming a successful pro surfer and making Burleigh, a proud place for one of its young groms or something. So anyway, I got strung up in a tree one day. There was pine trees that lined the point at Burleigh, and if there were really cheeky kids and cheeky grommets who, didn't respect their elders enough, sometimes you'd get tied to a tree with leg ropes and people would rub pies on you or throw sauce at you or just do silly things to humble you. But this day I was stripped down naked and my board was put up in the tree and my little weird board, and I was tied with my hands behind my back around the real pokey bark of the pine tree by my leg rope. And they were trying to stop me from being different, basically saying, no, what you're doing is not cool. You can't keep doing that. And I remember everyone was laughing, but then an old couple walked past and was like, leave that young fella alone, and got stuck into these guys. And so the leg rope was unvelcroed and I was let go. And it did not work. I literally just dug my feet in and realized that it didn't matter what that subculture around me had to say when I felt like I was just dancing to my own beat and having so much fun. It was like I was dancing and there was no one watching when I surfed that way. And it started to become, I guess, my thing and was very foundational for me having a successful surfing career and just a stoked surfing life with wide parameters. So I haven't got too many of those moments in my life where I didn't accept no and I rejected a no, but that one in particular, I feel that is one of those moments. So it's great when you hear Belen realize that for her, it was an uncommon decision for someone coming from the family and the location that she came from to choose longboarding, to choose surfing. And she just kept going. She just kept doing it.
Yeah, I was so excited to get to sit down and chat with her because I had a poster of her on my wall growing up, but mostly I've been struck by how little there is about her story out there on the web, in film. She was featured in Thomas Campbell's Sprout, Surfing in Sri Lanka. But other than that, there's not a lot of nostalgia in terms of material proof of Belen's story. And so I was so excited to sit down with her and really get her story down for everyone to know and understand, because she's been such an icon and a legend and such a fantastic contributor to our local surfing community. We always begin these conversations in the same place by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Do you have a story like that you'd be willing to share with us?
Oh, man, I've got a couple, but for me, I think one of the biggest moments in my life actually was when I first learned to surf. That was the complete altering of everything that I knew about me as a person and as within my culture and what I wanted to do with my life, because I grew up Mexican American, so first generation in America through my mother. I only knew of the cultures that I was raised with, which was very traditional. And my mother brought all of her religion and expectations of a Mexican daughter and tried to raise me like that in America.
Can you tell us about those traditional values?
Just no bathing suits, no, you don't go wear your bathing suit at the beach. When you answer your mother, it's mande usted que se le ofreza. Translated, it means command me, how may I serve you? But that is how my mother was raised to speak to her mother. And it's a very normal way. So it's like, you'd hear your name, mande, which means command me. And, learning how, obviously, from a very young age, cook, clean, wash, learn how to wash clothes in a river on rocks, learn how to make tortillas from scratch and kill chickens and learn how to cook. But those expectations of a culture that is so beautiful, but very, I guess, a circle around you, like you don't go out of those parameters. And growing up in America, especially California, is just so free, and it's just a pool of so much diversity of cultures. And you're exposed to so much new, and you want to bring these new things that you learned home. And you're met with no, we don't do that. No, that's not what you do. Okay, well, I'm going to do it. Watch me. And so I did exactly that. I went against the grain. I got in so much trouble. When I first wanted to learn to surf, it was just... nope.
Can you set the scene for us?
So to set the scene for you.
What year was that? What town were you in?
I was living in Vista, which is just inland from Oceanside in California. And I didn't go to one school longer than 3 years my whole life. I went from kindergarten to the middle of third grade at one school. Went from third grade to another elementary school. And then went from 6th to the middle of 7th grade at one middle school.
Why? Why were you switching
Because my
schools?
parents moved because they were looking at buying a house in California, because I was born in West Virginia. My dad's from Ohio. So he moved my mom from California to Ohio because he got a job there. And this poor little Mexican woman from pretty much the jungle got sent to Ohio.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And trees explode in the winter in Ohio. They get so cold, especially when you're up in the forest, it's cold. My mother drove, bless her, 4 hours to go see a female doctor because she refused to see a male doctor, which was in West Virginia.
Wow.
So every time she'd go to a doctor, she'd go to there and come back. And anyhow, I was born there. And my mom was like, I can't do this. I need to go back at least to California because my family's there and it's warmer. So I lived at my grandmother's house for a long time, as Mexicans do. One of my aunts lived in the garage with 5 of her kids. I was in a room with my other sister, and my parents were in a room with my baby sister in the crib. And I think one of my uncles lived in another room, and we all shared one bathroom upstairs and one bathroom downstairs. And it was in the ghetto part of Vista. It was just a lot of gang activity at the time. It was very much known for that, which was really low income. And it was like a duplex too. And
it would have been very loud.
It was so loud. It was like parrots every morning. It was just funny, And my grandma lived there too, right? So she had her own room.
Wow. And was she your mom's?
This is my mom's mom,
Wow.
and I'm named after
Okay.
her. Her name is Belen as well.
Belen, can I ask, what was the inspiration for your family to immigrate?
Okay, so my mother, she's from, they call it the Sierra, which is like, it's the jungle highland of inland from Zihuatanejo. And you can only get to it to a certain degree, to a certain part on a car. And then from there, you have to take either a horse or a mule up to the very top. And that's where my grandmother was at. And so my grandmother raised 10 kids all by herself. My grandfather lived in the Caribbean side on a horse ranch, on a cattle ranch. And so my grandmother wanted a better life for her kids. So she immigrated all 10 kids to America, to Fallbrook, which is just inland from Oceanside.
How do you even, the logistics of moving
of that,
10
right?
children by yourself?
Any English.
Wow, that's so
right?
brave.
You don't speak any English, and she did it all legally as well. But again, she didn't speak any English. The kids didn't speak any English, and they moved to an immigrant camp in Fallbrook, which was picking cucumbers and strawberries. So that's what my mother did. And at 19, she was still in high school. She didn't graduate high school till she, I think, was 21 because she didn't speak English. But she wanted to graduate high school, and so she had to learn how to speak English. So in between school, she was go back to the immigrant camps and she'd be picking. And they lived in, immigrant camps. And my mother told me it was really hard because they didn't have really good standards at the time. And there was a really amazing activist called Cesar Chavez who was really pushing for proper housing and immigrant rights and stuff. And so my mom, being my mom, so spicy, she started, helping with just kind of rallying and being a voice and an activist part with the movement of making sure that people had good living standards. And then my grandmother was able to purchase a house, the duplex. And so they were able to move to Vista. So then when my mom was living at my grandmother's house, my father had moved from Ohio and was renting a room out at the house right next door. And then, he met my mom. And of course, my mom was still learning English, and my grandmother and grandfather didn't speak any English. But 2 months later, after dating, they got married, and they're still married.
Wow.
So there was just to better an opportunity. But my grandmother was so funny. She really wanted to make sure that everyone was Mexican by birth. So when she had her last one, she went down to TJ just to have the kid in Tijuana so that it could still be Mexican.
Wow.
It was pretty funny. But
so given that thank you so much for sharing. It's so great to hear this. We were chatting with Rusty Miller, who's from California, just recently, and he was talking about just the way Southern California was just taken from Mexican people by America, and that essentially it's Mexico, where everyone's living down there. It's Mexico, but America just really bullied its way in. And that underneath all of the stuff that's going on there, it's Mexican people that are there making the wheels turn, keeping things moving there. But that's his point of view as a little white fella growing up in a white family in a white suburb there. So it's really cool to hear your lived experience. And it makes me wonder, if there was this departure from Mexico, from your mum's line, but there was this deep love for that culture and that tradition, how did they dance that line? They didn't want to be down there because the living situation wasn't so great, or there wasn't as many opportunities, but they wanted all the other aspects of culture. When you were getting heat for wanting to go surfing, was it your mother and your mother's mother giving you grief, or was your grandma a little more do it, little Billy, and do it?
Oh my God, my grandma, she's amazing. I love her, I miss her. It was my whole family that was actually just gave me so much shit. It was crazy. I remember when I started learning to surf with my friend, she was awesome, and I'm still friends with her. Her name's Melissa Skelton, and she's the best. I stayed the night at her house and took me surfing, and like I said, I had that experience. And I remember when I went back and I told my family what I was doing, first thing was Mexicans don't surf. That's for white people. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, shaka bra, dude, hang tan, full. My cousins made so much fun of me, and and they love me and they care about me, but they just gave me so much shit for it. And I was at a family reunion at I think it was Echo Park. It was up in It was inland LA. And they're like, man, Mexicans don't surf. Why are you doing that? And so I was like, I love it. You know, it's fun and it's a whole different community. And I want to do something different. I don't want to just be the normal Mexican, not to say, you know, that there's a thing as a normal Mexican, but I want to do something different. And I want to break down those stereotypes of what it is to be a Latina in a sport that they really like. And they're like, whatever, Coco. So that was my nickname for a while. My family is coconut translated because I'm brown on the outside, trying to act white. So that was my, so that was like, yeah,
that's harsh.
It was super harsh, but I grew up very much school hard knocks, you know, like from my cousins, and I'm so grateful for that. But yeah, so at first it was just, yeah, they didn't see it. I'm like, what do you mean? Brown people surf? Like, look at the Hawaiians, you know, like, and, you know, at the time I wasn't educated about how far back surfing actually had gone, like down into Peru and other places. And obviously throughout Polynesia and stuff like that, as I became more infatuated with surfing and everything about it and educating myself, I was like, now I wish I had all that to go back, you know, go back at the wind. But yeah, it was
me too. That's why I made the book that I did about women surfing, because I was thinking if I had had this resource as a young, blue-eyed, blonde-haired girl who fit the stereotype, imagine how meaningful it could be for a girl who maybe doesn't fit that old stereotype to see that there have always been brown women.
Yeah.
There have always been
it. That's it. And I guess with surfing in my immediate culture, it was new. And the only real sports anyone in my family played was, you know, soccer. My mom was like the queen of the soccer. Like I got photos of my mom like with a big headdress, like traditional, like full soccer queen, you know, like just that's what you do, you know. And as well, we didn't have the money for me to really do a lot of those other sports, like team sports. So when I started doing this, they were like, no, you're not doing this. And I was like, okay, watch me. And
how old were you?
I was 15 at the time. So
I can just imagine a 15-year-old you just being so fired up.
I was so fired up. Like, what? Okay. And so a real turn in that, I started not using my lunch money for lunch, and I would like start hitchhiking rides and save up money from babysitting. And my chemistry teacher at the time surfed, and he knew a surfboard shaper, and so I told him what I wanted to do, and I was like, can you help me? Unaware of my parents knowing what I was doing, like I saved up enough money to get a board, and my mom's like, fine, I'll take you to get a surfboard, but like I'm not picking you up, I'm not taking you, I'm not doing anything like that. So I was hitchhiking rides to the beach, like 15, 16, like coming back and like drying my hair in the car with the heater so I didn't get so busted, you know, kind of stuff. And yeah, I was surfing in Carlsbad, like at Terramar and at Eeyores, which is just a bunch of cliffs there. And I didn't have a wetsuit or anything. And in California in the wintertime, that's cold. And, you know, I was just doing whatever I got taught by my friend's dad. And then there was a couple older ladies that were so beautiful, and they would just give me kind of little tips. And some of the older guys there, you know, like, hey, Gidge, kind of thing, you know, as all of us girls got called at that time. And then this beautiful homeless Vietnam vet named Scary Larry, who lived out of his Nissan truck, who parked up at Terramar, at Eeyore, sorry. He's like, hey, Gidge, come here. I have something for you. So I walked over there, and he had a spring suit. He gave me his own spring suit. Huh. Like, how's that? Like a homeless Vietnam vet that just, I mean, he had his little black, like, pit bull doggy in the car, and it was just them two, and to give. And that, to me, is what the surfing community right there. I was like, oh, my God, this is just amazing. Like, and I owe so much to him. You know, and I actually went back to try to find him when I was writing for Billabong, and I wanted to just kit him out with everything. Yeah. And he unfortunately passed away by then, so I never really got to tell him how much that did for me. But yeah, so I'd just go like surf for a little bit, climb up on the cliffs and get sun, and then I got the wetsuit, and that was it. I was like, ooh, okay, we're ready to do this, you know.
So it would have been a men's wetsuit too, yeah?
Oh, yeah. And he was little, though, so it wasn't, I mean, it didn't fit skin tight, but it was, you know, it was enough.
Better than nothing.
Yeah, and back then, you know, like just nothing like beans and rice and tortillas, you know, you get hips and everything like that, so I was fine. Yeah.
You know? And what about board? What were you riding? What did you start on?
At the time, I would just ride anything any of my friends had, but then I was lucky, like I said, Terry Sennett, who's a shaper up at San Clemente, and he's now passed on, but he actually made me a board. And so it was a little 8-6, little 2+1, three finner. And I learned to just basics on that.
That's pretty unique because at that period in time, it's not the world. It was not the world it is now back then.
No.
Like it was pretty much white pointy nose thrusters was what everyone was riding.
Yeah.
And you had a few.
What year was that? 90?
Yeah, this would have been 93. 92,
so
93.
How did that happen? How did he go, this is what you're getting? Did you want that?
That was my chemistry teacher.
Oh.
That was my chemistry teacher telling me exactly, okay, well, if you want to learn to surf, this is what you should do. And this is what you should get. Yes, it was awesome. So, so I got that, and then I'd stash it at my friend's house that lived by Eeyores. And the funny thing is my mother worked 500 meters or like half a kilometer away from Eeyores. And like she wouldn't pick me up from the beach. And finally she realized that my daughter's going to get kidnapped if she's hitchhiking back and forth. And so she decided one day that totally not wanting to, was like, okay, I will pick you up at the top of the cliff when I'm done from work, but you better be up there. And I was like, oh my God, she's changing. Okay, this is cool. So finally, one day my mom picked me up from surfing, and then I think she realized how much I really loved it, and I was going to do it with or without their permission. Man, I'd stole my dad's truck to go surfing. My dad would hide the keys. I learned how to totally jimmy rig his truck, without a license, to go surfing. Oh yeah, it was so bad. My mom called the cops on me a couple of times, trying to get me arrested for stealing his car. Because I was like, I'm doing this. And now I can say it, and I'm okay because I don't have anything to be shy about that. But because you could put a knife in the keychain where the key ignition goes, and you could fully ignite it and turn the engine over.
I get the sense, I started surfing when I was 14, similar age to when you did, and I get the sense looking back that surfing really kept me out of trouble. Did it feel that way for you looking back?
It did. It kept me out of trouble. I didn't grow up with a family that drank, or my dad smoked cigarettes and stuff, but I've never seen my mother drunk. I think I've seen my mother have maybe a glass of wine maybe 3 times my whole life. I think I've seen my dad have a beer maybe 4 or 5 times. My immediate family, we grew up pretty in the church too. And so that was a very big thing in my family's life, was religion. And when I say religion, my mom studied. So she liked to study about it, and she loved learning about it and not just going to church and then carrying your lifestyle completely different. And so the extended side of that crazy life, I didn't really do a lot of that kind of stuff. I didn't really, I went to the parties here and there, snuck out here and there, kind of thing, as we all do. And lying if you say you don't. But I didn't fall into a lot of the patterns that a lot of people do at that age, and I just had a lot of fun, and I have so much energy as it is that I didn't need anything in my life to make me happier or louder or
substances.
More. Yeah, I didn't need, because I would have been like Beetlejuice, I think my head would have spun off or something, But my extended family, all my cousins and aunts and uncles, it was always barbecues and beer and carne asadas, and it was always large, big family gatherings. I have, I think, 150 maybe blood cousins, straight up. Pretty crazy. I could show you my shirt, of all my cousins' names, and that's blood. So when we get together, there's always beer and meat and food, and it's a big party, and we're loud and we have fun. But I didn't get really into that kind of side of super, what people consider bad problems. I didn't get into them,
Which makes it, that's sort of enlightening in terms of the concerns of your parents, because they would have seen that the surfing culture in Southern California was filled with parties and smoking pot and, a lot of drugs and questionable behavior. So maybe they thought that if you were going to start surfing, you could be pulled into those sort of circles if they were, pretty clean living and everything.
Yeah, it's crazy because especially back in the 90s and the early thousands, the surf culture was crazy.
Especially there.
Especially in California.
It was hectic. It's that whole Sublime sort of party scene. That was legitimate problems. People were pretty tweaked.
Yeah, and like I said, I think as soon as I was getting ready to graduate high school, the first all-girls surf shop opened up in Encinitas. called Water Girl. And I was so lucky because I was so excited about surfing and, you know, just this little big-eyed, like, oh my God, this is so fun and it's so healthy and happy and this is all I want to do. So I was like, I got a job there. And Ilona, I'm still friends with her. She's amazing. She did so much for women back then. And then like the first all-girls surf school opened up at La Jolla that Izzy started called Surf Diva. So I was just kind of stuck straight into like working in a surf shop, working in a surf school, and you know,
and that had never those like kind of safe spaces for women to engage with surfing amongst other women that had never existed before.
No, not really, because there was amazing events for women. Like WISA was there, which was the Women's International Surfing Association, and then they had, you know, obviously the shortboard tours and stuff like that. But there wasn't any like surf shops, like you said, or surf schools, or they had, you know, the longboard clubs was still quite supportive of women longboarding. But yeah, once that first initial one started, then they started popping up everywhere. And it was really beautiful because it was gathering these women that had learned to surf in the 60s and 70s, giving them a safe place, and all these young girls that are coming in, and it was fun.
Oh, it became an intergenerational playground.
It was so beautiful, and that's where, you know, like old culture is oral. You know, we teach our traditions through conversations and hands-on and touch. And all of a sudden, these women were coming and they were explaining their journeys and their stories and everything that they'd been through and giving us tips. And it was fun. It wasn't just reading stuff out of a magazine that was dominantly male orientated. It was coming from a woman who was much older and had experienced things and saying, well, I did this, don't do this. And and it was so amazing. And it started this beautiful ball of energy that just kept growing and growing and growing. And all of a sudden, surf shops all over America for women and stuff like that was happening.
My first job was also it was called an all-girls surf shop, The Girl Next Door.
I remember The Girl Next Door. Yes, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, that was my first job. And it was at a point in time. It was the only all-girls surf shop on the East Coast. It was at a point in time where that could have never existed before that particular moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't really exist now, but there was that time when women's surfing was just growing and blooming in these beautiful ways, connecting with the women who had sort of been pushed out of surf culture, bringing them back in. And you were such an icon of that period. Before we get into that, I want to ask you, what led you to longboarding in particular?
Well, my personality, I'm very loud and in your face, but it's very authentic. Because that's just how I grew up. You know, if you wanted to be heard, you had to be loud in my family. You just got talked over. But longboarding for me was just more my style. I didn't skateboard like that. I didn't approach life like that. And I just loved the community with the longboard crew. And I loved the way that they approached riding waves. And I wasn't a big adrenaline junkie, where I found that a lot of the shortboard mentality was just not what I wanted from surfing. And I just wanted to have fun. I just didn't, and longboarding for me was easy. When I was young, I'd have my kneecap. I grew up riding horses, and I had my knee kicked by my horse. So it took me actually a long time to actually be able to stand up properly. I used to use my knee to pop up probably for like a year and a bit until I finally was able to do it properly. So that was another reason why, you know, the bigger 8.6 and all that kind of stuff was really pseudo for me. And once I got on a proper log, you know, that was like, oh, this is so beautiful. Like, I like riding everything. And California, the waves in California are very pseudo to longboards. We've got so many beautiful longboard waves, and we've got some really good shortboard waves too. But where I live, you could go and surf some of the reefs, and I'm not going to say names, but you can go surf a bunch of spots, and it's just was fun. And yeah, I just like paddling out, and you could just sit and talk.
So the year was 2001. I was in my second year of high school. And the rumor through my little town on the east coast of Florida, a little island, little barrier island just off the coast, was that the Billabong girls team was coming to town to sign posters. And so you did. It was you, Lane Beachley, and Kiala Kennelly on a Billabong girls tour. and you signed a poster for me, and I had it up on my wall for many years. Hanging 5, you were. And
Didn't you just take it down when we started dating and I was coming to your house?
Before Dave came to the house, before Dave came to visit my mom's house for the first time, I had 12 billion surf stickers. And I don't know why, but for some reason I felt humiliated.
So,
I stayed up at night razor blading stickers off of my period.
Gave her like 24 hours notice. I'm coming to get you. I'm coming because
what's the thing I can control? Every one of those stickers.
Oh my God, Lauren. That's so funny.
So your poster would have been there and I missed out.
Thanks, Dave.
I would like to have seen what was written on that poster too. Did you have lots of good one-liners to write on posters, Belen?
I think I stole one from someone, but I loved it. I think it was like smile, have fun, hang 10.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. That's what I got.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Or the other one was like, follow your dreams and live life and hang 10 or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I remember hang 10 being
Yeah.
on there and being like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I'd been surfing for 2 or 3 years at that point and was totally enamored by longboarding and the subtlety, and especially surfers who kept their hands below their waist. And you always did that. And I loved that about your surfing. Can you tell us about that trajectory from surfing, capturing your heart, to then becoming one of the handful of sponsored free surfers, male or female, in the world at that time? How did that happen? How did you get a sponsor?
I got married really young. I married a really beautiful, kind person. His name was Kevin, and he was an amazing longboarder. And he's a master of his craft with shaping. And I owe a lot of my surfing to him giving me really a lot of tips and helping me as well, creating boards that worked really well for me. And I was exposed to amazing shapers and surfers. Skip Fry had taught him how to shape. And so had Larry Gordon. And kind of before I was actually riding his boards, I got sponsored by Dick Brewer, because he was looking for a female to ride his board. So I got a couple boards from Dick, which is awesome. And then I went on to riding Kevin's boards. And I was just exposed to so many amazing surfers and older surfers. That just, they had it down, they understood, and you walk into like Skip's shaping room and you just see these calendars that he had of every single surf that he checked. And he'd have I think it was a 1 to 5, and there was very few 5s. But and it was like 10 years of surf report, written down. And you learn things like that from them, and you hear their stories of, okay, well, when you trim, make sure that you're this, and, this is why I like this pintail, and this is why I like this square toe. So I was just around a lot of amazing elders that help educate me. And if I do something, oh, hey, try this, use your toes here. And it wasn't coaching, but it was just doing what cultures do, is educate. And so I picked it up quite quickly. And then obviously I needed equipment. And so people saw that I was picking it up, and they're like, hey, do you want to wear this sweatsuit? And I was like, yeah, of course. That keeps me warm, thank you. And then, being with Kevin as well, he was shooting and everything like that. So I was able to start getting shot. And then kind of one thing led to another. I think it was ASR. And, we all walked around with our little portfolios, like what you did back in the day. It was Dave, I'm sure you probably had one maybe back in the day, where it was just a folder with all your photos and magazines and experiences. And here, this is me. This is me. Can I get some stuff? Because your stuff's really expensive and I can't afford it, and I like it, and I'll stay warm in it. But it just it honestly happened to be the right time and the right place, because the person that grabbed my folder at the Billabong booth was Paul Nadine, who owned Billabong. He had just purchased it or taken over the licensee from Bob Hurley, because Bob Hurley had just stepped away and started Hurley. And so Paul started it. And Paul is a surfboard shaper, and he's an amazing surfer. And he's a real roots person, at least at the time he was, And we talked and we just got along. And Billabong had just really launched their females range. in America.
That was the start of, I refer to it as the separate but trying to be equal phase in surfing, where all the brands just sort of cleaved off a division and made a women's brand, usually by adding women or girls to their name. So it was separate and creating their own culture around what women's surfing was.
And they really did. Like, they started making female specific cut wetsuits, you know, and I do want to give a massive acknowledgement to a female that had been doing this way before. Her name's Lane Pogue, and Lane is from Hawaii, and she surfs pipe, and she started like a board short company years before anyone was doing really board shorts, and it's called Us Girls. And Lane's amazing. She's a beautiful woman. She charges pipe very, you know, but yes, she did a lot way before, you know, a lot of these other companies kind of came in and started. But yes, I just want to do a massive shout out to her and acknowledge her because she's amazing. She's a big pioneer in women's.
I've never heard her
Good
name.
on you.
Yeah,
and
women.
that's surprising. I've never heard Lauren mention her name.
Yeah, I think she has a different last name. It might be Lane Daly now, but I think it was Lane Pogue back in the day. And she's a goofy footer. Yeah. Pipe girl. But anyhow, so it kind of took off, and I was like, and he's like, well, what do you want? I was like, I don't want to do contests because I'm not a competitive surfer. I suck at contests. And I just would rather sit and watch someone surf in a heat. I tried a couple of times. I won a couple events, made a couple of finals, but that wasn't just me. I was the woohoo girl. I wanted to cheer everyone else on, and I just loved it because contests would gather all the tribes together and we'd just have fun at them. You know, so I said, I don't want to do that. I said, if you give me money and let me travel around the world, let me promote women in the surf and show them that you don't have to be a certain stereotype to surf, and you can do it for fun. And they're pretty much like on board with it. You know, I had obligations, you know, that I had to do for them as a sponsor. But for the most part, yeah, they gave me a travel budget. And yeah, it was like, here's your salary, you know, here's your budget. Go do it.
Be an ambassador for surfing.
Yeah, be an ambassador for women surfing. And so anytime I went on a surf trip, I really tried to engage, if I had the opportunity, with any local girls and hang out with them and talk. I went and ran a bunch of surf schools for Surf Diva down at Costa Rica, which was so fun, and got to hang out with a lot of the Tica girls there. Like, all the local girls. Went to Canada and did some stuff for one of the surf schools up there, and just meeting women. It was pretty funny because I wrote down a list of all the countries that I'd been to a while ago, and there was not very many countries besides in the northern part of Africa and all those individual and certain parts of Europe and Antarctica that I hadn't been to, you know, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I got to travel the world and do this for fun and just try to be a good role model for young women, and as well inspire women that maybe had stopped doing it to get back into it as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great to hear, and to just remember that period in time in these ways from the inside, because, you know, there's not many of us who were in the surfing world who, I guess in those early 2000s, late 90s period, who were supported by the surf companies but weren't ultra competitive. And those of us who were able to, you know, slice off a little bit of that pie and explore our surfing interests, I think just have lots of really interesting stories. Because, you know, if you're on the contest circuit, you're going to the same place every year. It's a pretty rigid schedule you're stuck to. Whereas for us, it's kind of like, okay, where is your imagination going to lead you? So during that time, what were you doing that was like lighting you up the most? Because I know when we speak, you get really animated and lit up about teaching young girls and sharing surfing with people in that way, specifically young women. Was that something you were really starting to cultivate then, even though it was at the time where your surfing life was really successful and supported? Were you starting to think of how you were going to pass things on, or that part of you that seems to really light you up? Was that there?
Well, I never planned on the future, anything past surfing as a job. I had no formal education. You know, when I was first at high school, like I said, I grew up with horses. I was the girl that brought home every animal you can think of that was either stray or I thought was stray, where I tried to say it was a stray. And I mean, I'm talking everything from peacocks to chickens to ducks to horses. Like,
what about squirrels? Did you ever save a squirrel?
I don't know. I didn't ever save a squirrel. No, I didn't.
Squirrels.
I didn't save a squirrel. No, I can't say I did that. Just so I wanted to actually be a vet. Through high school, I worked at the local vet, probably 10, 11, 12, or 11, 12, year 12. And that's what I wanted to do. And this vet was so cool. He'd let me come in and I'd work in the back and he'd teach me everything that he was doing and saving animals. And I've got a very big soft spot for animals. So that was like, I'm going to be a vet. This was before obviously surfing came in and said, nope, you're going this way. So when the idea of what am I going to do after surfing now that I am doing this as a career and as a job, I didn't even think about it. And you don't, when you're in that place, you only think you're in the moment, you're living the moment. And
you're living your dream.
You're living your dream.
For most people in that situation.
And so you're not thinking about how am I going to, what am I going to do when this is done? Because no one prepares you for that reality of it. And the only thing I ever thought of maybe is I'll just get a job in the industry afterwards because that's what all the boys do. So never thought about it. But what I did notice is anytime I was in the water surfing, I would always end up with those girls or those women that are struggling surfing. And I'd always make sure I went, hey, can I give you some unsolicited advice? How about if you do this and do that? And then seeing them come back like, oh my God, thank you so much, and seeing the stoke from that, I was like, this is awesome, and I would just do it naturally because that's the kind of person I am. I'm very much a person of service. And so just I think as time moved forward and it was coming to the end of my career and I was like, what am I going to do? I've gone through a divorce. I've got to figure out my life. What am I going to do? I've moved to Hawaii by this time. There wasn't really an opportunity for me in Hawaii once, because I wasn't on the mainland anymore. And when I moved to Australia, I was like, I'm going to start a surf school. That's what I'm going to do. It might not do well here because it's a very different culture here compared to California. And so at the time, I was sponsored by a company called Salty Girls. And I said, hey, can I, get the rights to the name because I want to start a girls' surf school here called Salty Girls. No one's done it here. I know there's a couple of surf schools that have female surfing here, but I don't know of, at the time, of anything that's specifically for women, female coaches, and only women. And this was 15 years ago. And so I went out on a leaf and started that. And that's kind of where I'm at now with it.
I'm interested in that transition period. You mentioned divorce, you mentioned moving, you mentioned leaving the security of a career that you'd been in for 10 or 15 years. Was that a tumultuous time? Were they aligned, those big changes?
You know what? The crazy thing is I had so much support from my sponsors moving from California to Hawaii. They helped me ship all my stuff over. They were awesome. Jessica Trent was the team manager at the time. And she was like, I hear you, girl. Let's do this. And Megan Brainerd as well. We're like, yeah, I hear you. Let's go. And so they did everything they could to help me when I moved to Hawaii to keep me a part of the team and a part of the program. And they started giving me little jobs as team mom. So I would go all the outer islands with the little girls that rode for Billabong, like Leila Hurst and this is when Coco was really young, Malia was really young, and they were all doing all the NSSAs. Bethany was really young. And so I was taking all the girls, all the outer islands and stuff. And for me, again, I think that was kind of unknowingly preparing me for this next transition of working with little girls. And I wasn't coaching them, but just being more of a mentor, support, an adult.
Were you 25 or something as teen mama?
I was 25.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
That gives us, right? Isn't that
that gives us some
know.
scope for surfing's time frame for professional females.
That's it.
At 25, you're now a mother.
At 25, you are now traveling with kids. But I was still doing surf trips with magazines and writing for articles and still being a part of it all. But I was just trying to find where my next to, because my future was planned. I thought this was where I was going to be doing for the rest of my life, And so it was a hard transition, especially leaving my family and moving to Hawaii.
Were you still with Kevin when you moved?
No, that's when we got divorced.
Okay.
And then I moved to Hawaii. And my parents, I was living at my parents' house, I was purchasing their house, and we sold that. And I started fresh. I literally started with a computer and a bunch of surfboards and box of clothes and renting a house on the North Shore and going, okay, here we are. I'm divorced. What am I going to do with my life now? And not that divorce it's not a bad thing if it's a phase in life, it's just a transition. But it was like, okay, I've got to start all over again. And when I first moved to Hawaii, we had a team house at Sunset, and it was just right at the point. And it was just this little shack. You know what I'm talking about. Remember that house? Yeah. And so, they let me go and stay at this house for a while until I found a place to live. I had a couple boards that was shaped more gunny longboards because I was doing trips to the Mentawais and stuff like that. And I really liked to get barreled. I loved getting barreled on my longboard. I loved it. I just thought it was so much fun. And so many people would say, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, let me do. And I'd get smoked, but I loved it. It's just something so fun because I didn't ride a shortboard really well in barrels. I was so uncomfortable in heavy waves on my shortboard, but fine on my 9-1, So anyhow, when you surf in Hawaii, first thing you learn is you got to call the buoy reports, because the buoy reports tell you, in so many hours, this is the size of the swell and the period of the swell. And, and then in the next buoy report, size of the swell and the period of the swell. And so it gives you a pretty good gauge. Okay, in 3 hours, it's going to go from 2 foot to 6 foot to 10 foot to whatever. Common. That's staple. Just like wax, it's staple. You just call the buoy report. And I'd been surfing Sunset for a while now, and I was starting to kind of figure the lineup. And Jeff Bushman lived 2 streets back from me, and his daughter Taylor Bushman is so sweet, and Reynos Hayes and all those people that lived and the Hoes lived just more backyards and all that. But Jeff Bushman kind of took me under his wing a little bit out at Sunset and stuff, and kind of showed me the lineup and stuff. And so I felt really comfortable out there, and I never surfed over the bridge. I'd never even surfed Rockies yet.
Wow.
I'd never even surfed VLAN, and I'm not VLAN. Gas chambers or Pupukea. I was too scared when I first moved there to go surf over the bridge. So I stayed on the Sunset side, Anyhow, so this one day I paddled out and I didn't call the buoy reports in the. It was lunch. I would have been married around 3:00 or whatever. And I didn't call the buoy reports, just frothing because it was 2 foot and perfect, And I was like,
what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? It's 2 foot, and I'm just gonna go out on my more high performance longboard, So it was had a little bit of rocker in and stuff. Anyhow, so I'm out there and I'm surfing. I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm wearing a vest and a bathing suit. And my friend Kellyanna Woolsey, she was out there, and I think Bonga was on the beach. I don't know, a couple of people were there. But anyhow, I'm surfing, and, all of a sudden, a little 3-footer feathers through. And I was like, woo, little set, And then, a little bit sooner, here comes a 4-foot set. And then, a couple more bigger sets. And I'm going, ooh, okay. And all of a sudden, I see, Nathan Hedge paddle out on a gun, and I see Miles Padaka, everyone starts paddling out on these guns, slowly trickling out, and I'm going, okay, and it's starting to kind of pick up, quite quickly, and it does pick up quite quickly there.
Oh my!
And I'd never really experienced that yet, and then all of a sudden I just look out the back, and there was these white horses, I guess you could just say, just these freaking bombs coming straight towards me, and I'm just going, oh my God, and I'm scratching to try to get out because I'm just oh my God. And this is just solid 6 to 8 foot, solid 6 to what the boys are calling 6 to 8 foot, And I was oh my God, I need to get in. I don't want to be out here. I'm kind of panicking, and I remember I just turned around, and I think it was Miles that yelled at me. I was go, just go, to drop in. And I went to paddle for the set just to get in. I wanted to go in. And I remember taking off, and I didn't make the takeoff. And I just free fell down on my board. And I just felt it took 5 minutes for me to get to the bottom of the wave. But I just remember going down, and when you pin drop, but I didn't quite penetrate. So my feet actually got sucked over backwards and I went over with the lip and my vest came up.
I knew it was going to be the vest.
My vest came up and like I had my hands above my head and my vest kind of did like a little knot and I was just getting tumbled all over and it was black and my leg rope had snapped. So my board was gone. I didn't know which way was up or down and I just was like trying to get this vest off and I'm panicking, because I'd never experienced anything like this before. And so I'm trying to pull this vest off and I just kind of slowly make it to the surface as I finally get my vest and I go to pull it off and this other set just comes and lands on my head and I just get pile driven into down deep. And it's so deep right there too. Where I was at, I didn't hit the reef, but I had no oxygen and I was like literally crying underwater, like panicking because I'm like, I can't do this. Like, this is heavy. And in the meantime, I think Kellyanna had seen my board kind of wash, because it doesn't really wash in at sunset, but it comes in and like, where is she, kind of thing. And I get up, I've thrown my vest because I can't hold on to it. And I'm crying and I'm trying to swim in and I'm just copping these big sets on the head. And I finally get in and I'm bawling, trying to catch my breath, and I just get on the beach and just kind of throw up on the beach, and just I'm rattled at this point. I've never had a hold down or been pushed down or lost my sense of direction. Got my board, walked back to the house. I was just in the shower crying, like, oh my God, I could have died. And I've had my ass handed to me a couple of times surfing, but nothing like that. But from that moment on, it taught me about practicing getting strong in the water, training, understanding the mind, and learning as well not to be slack and call the buoy reports and all that kind of stuff. But from that moment forward, I really wanted to make sure that if I ever was in the ocean, I could be able to handle kind of whatever situation came to me. But that was a big monumental time of my near drowning experience, and no one knowing or seeing where I was at or really knowing that I was hurt. And was a whole nother thing. Don't ever surf by yourself, especially like that. So that was my big scary moment out at sunset. And still to this day, I don't think I've ever had like a wipeout or a scarier situation like that in my life.
Yeah, the vest thing is a full red alert. That's like a warning sign for bigger waves or waves of consequence. If you don't wear a vest, like a wetsuit vest. I mean, now they've got the flotation ones and everything, but I've had a similar thing happen at sunset too with a vest when I was like 15.
Yeah.
It was good actually. It happened straight away when I was a grommet to teach me about that. And I remember Bugs, Robert Bartholomew, saying that to me as well. And I have to think that wave has probably gifted so many people with that experience now over the millennia of pre-European times, way back to the ancients, and then from there until now. I know so many people, nearly anyone who's surfed there has had that happen because of the mana, the power of that wave. It's so beautiful, it entices you in, and then that West Peak comes in like a pyramid of Giza or something and just lands on you, and you get a real moment and appreciation of your life, of the power of breath, how important breath and how important mind is, your state, because it can go from just 0 to 100 there so quickly like that.
Please stay tuned while we take a quick break to acknowledge the folks who help make our podcast possible.
If the first 50 years were an experiment,
to prove that a business could be
responsible
and successful,
turns out it's not just possible,
it's profitable.
So what's next?
What's next is simple. It's human-powered, and it's finding the joy in doing difficult things.
What's next is turning capitalism on its head
and putting all our money where our mouth is.
What's next is unstoppable.
Thanks to Patagonia for their continued support this season and for prioritizing purpose over profit to protect our wondrous planet, our only home. Born on the back streets of Byron Bay, Stone and Wood is a certified B Corp started by 3 mates who wanted to make a beer business with a difference, a brewery for the community. Through their Ingrained Foundation, Stone and Wood donates money and volunteer hours directly to the communities where they work and live, focusing on the environment and social causes at a grassroots level. Thanks for your support this season, Stone and Wood, and thanks for giving back to our community here on the Northern Rivers. Learn more at stoneandwood.com.au.
Then moving here, it was scary in Australia, especially at the time. I never really had a hard time surfing here. As a female, I didn't really find a lot of the same, I guess, feelings that a lot of other girls that grew up here felt with being either oppressed or not as supported, because I couldn't fail the men in America because they supported me so much, and the females, and we had so much over there compared to what was available here for women.
Wow, that's so interesting to hear. I've never heard this point of view before. So you're saying that for young women here, it was really sort of tough in lineups and tough in general with the industry?
I think that, there was a lot, especially in the women's longboard scene. I think that there wasn't as much opportunities for the longboard girls here that was available for the shortboard girls, but I don't even think there was as much here for just female in surfing, for a country where their sport was so huge and so supported. It's like your national sport. Where I came from, it was very different. So when I moved here, I thought it was just all happy Larry, like everyone's in the water still friends, it was very different. I think the culture for female surfing was probably several years behind where we were at within America. And it even came down to, we had like 3 or 4 female publications for surfing in America. We had Surfing Girl, Surfer Girl, Wahine. We had, I think there was something from the East Coast as well. Was it like East Coast Girl or East Coast Magazine? Did they do something as well?
Yeah, maybe ESM had a
I think
girls.
ESM.
Yeah, there were quite a few.
But there was so much for women. And I think there was one, maybe 2 magazines here.
Oh, yeah, there was one. It was called Chick.
There was Chick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was different.
Yep,
yeah.
For sure.
Coming here, I had friends here already, so I've had a lot of fun in the lineups, and I surfed Rainbow a lot and Snapper, and I'd known Wayne from being on the world tour when he was traveling and stuff like that. So he kind of took me in, like
Wayne Dean or Wayne Rabbit Bartholomew?
Well, both, but more Wayne Dean.
Oh, wow.
And Colleen, kind of took me in like Hanai, like adopted parents at Snapper and at Rainbow. So I'd go surfing and I'd go out with them, and he would kind of like, father me there, like look out for me and, protect, make sure that I got waves and stuff and stick up for me and stuff like that. So I felt the transition here for myself so supported and happy. But I noticed there was definitely a lack of opportunities for women that really wanted to do the sport or partake in the sport, having a kind of a spot just for them. And it's not to say that, females and males, one is a better coach than the other at all. Because someone asked me out there, do you think a female coach is better than a male coach? No. I think that a female coach can relate to a woman that has just had a baby, is full of milk, and she's, still getting her body back. A female coach can relate to that woman more so than a man can. And like a male coach isn't going to talk to you about what you feel like when you're on your period, learning to surf, where a female can. And to me, those are the differences. And that's why I started Salty Girls.
To talk about periods.
To talk about periods and boobs and leaky boobies and all the emotional roller coaster that comes with different phases in a woman's life that a man understands but doesn't go through, So that was my journey with Salty Girls.
And what made you stay in Australia?
Well, I fell in love and I married again. And I had a beautiful little boy who's now 9. And this was home. By this time, especially now, I've spent more time in Australia as an adult than I have lived in America. So it's like Australia, I was thinking about that. I was like, wow, I kind of started coming here when I was like 26, moved here pretty much around 26, 27, and I'm 45 this year. And I was like, oh my God, I've almost been here half my life now, and I've got a beautiful community, like where I live, And it's just so nice. You walk down the street, you still see people, you know, and that really supported you when you first moved here. And they've helped raise my child. And yeah, so I never left. And I remember as a kid, when I was learning to surf, I always would see photos of Australia and the waves and everything. I was like, I'm going to move to Australia. I know it. I have a feeling. And having traveled everywhere that I've been to, I still think this is one of the best countries in the world for so many reasons. For environment, it is still so clean and beautiful and healthy. For the waves, obviously, you know, you can go anywhere and you can surf. You can still find some empty lineups. And I think environmentally, you guys are a little bit more on the supportive side. And I think you guys just have so much to offer. So I was like, I'm not going back to anywhere else. You know, I love it here.
I'd like to go back a little bit. I do find that interesting, your perspective coming from the States to Australia in relation to how women were treated around lineups and surfing here in Australia and the difference there. How does that world within our surf community feel to you now? Have we grown up a little bit, or are we still failing miserably when it comes to how we relate to each other as surfers? What's your perspective on how things feel now?
I think now there's more people surfing than ever before, firstly. And I think that a lot of the rules that were in place as far as respect and when I say hierarchy, I don't mean this in any other disrespectful way at all, but there used to be a lot of rules in the water that were taught about respect and waiting your turn. And when I say earning your way in the lineup, I mean it's putting the time in and educating yourself about all the rules of surfing. And I feel like, especially in the past couple of years with COVID and everyone being locked down, and at least in Australia, we were able to surf. So a lot of people took up learning to surf, but weren't taught a lot of the fundamentals or the rules of how it works. And so now I think where there was a time with females in the water that men were getting really excited to see women in the water. And it was nice because women were just like this little drop of peace. You know, you'd see a girl in the water and the boys, yeah, go, you know, because they were being supportive and nice. And then I think
it was so novel, wasn't it? Such a novelty to see.
It was novelty, and especially women that could surf well and that were, you know, being kind in the water and respectful. Then all of a sudden we just had this big influx of not only female but male in the water, and I think everyone just kind of got over it because everyone stopped doing the right thing. And I think a lot of people are just frustrated in the water now. And you have so many, I don't know how to say it, but I think people are just frustrated because they want the surfing lifestyle, but they don't or have not been educated in the time that it takes to get to being at that level where you surf certain waves. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And this is too good of a transition not to go there. Recently in Byron Shire, there was a law passed, a leg rope law requiring all surfers to wear leashes in Byron Shire. We'll see if that goes ahead next year when signage is installed. But as a surf instructor, you're someone who passes on and shares the etiquette and the wisdom of what it means to be a respectful surfer. And as someone who has ridden traditional longboards without leashes for much of your surfing life, how does the law land for you? But more importantly, how do we move forward in a way that allows our lineups to be more cooperative, respectful, and safer?
I think that working with women or just working with people in general that are learning to do a new sport, it is so important we teach about safety and handling equipment. And I find that a duty of care is so important when you're learning board skills, and board handling skills is such a key fundamental. Having grown up, a lot of my boards never even had leg ropes. And I was taught if you're surfing and you fall off, you did something stupid, or you took a risk that you shouldn't have, or you weren't reading the wave properly. You deserved to swim. And everybody in the water was very aware of their surroundings and what was going on. I don't ever really remember of collisions in the water from loose boards when I was growing up. This is, again, back in the day when dinosaurs were around. So, like you'd be swimming for your board. And I have a song specifically that is my swim song. And it's a beautiful morning. Casey and the Sunshine Man. That is my song for when I would swim. And I swear at one point I thought I would be an Olympic long distance swimmer. But and you learn to swim real damn fast because some of the beaches in California are covered in rocks and stuff and they smash your board, And when you got a longboard with a glass on fin, you don't want that to happen. Anyhow, so you learn to not take off on waves you wouldn't be able to do. You learned how all those really important wave reading skills. And as well, you also learn when you fall, how to jump and grab your board. And that is the most important thing. It's your floating device. It's your duty of care. And you don't want to swim. Yeah. So you make the effort.
It's an important point you're making that I think a lot of people do not consider for people who are taking responsibility with surfing without a leash is that many of us, and I'll include myself in that camp, I also grew up in a place where it was fine to not wear leashes because there weren't many people. And so I didn't, and I learned a lot, and I found that experience incredibly value for making me a better surfer, better reader of waves. It made me more conservative, but you did whatever you had to do to hold on to your board. And that was part of the surfing experience. You weren't just it wasn't all about just hanging 10. It was you're trying to remain in control of your craft at all times. That was an element in what it meant to be a good surfer.
It very much was. And especially when you're on a log and, you're walking to and from the nose and, a section shuts down in front of you, to bend down and squat, or even if you need to grab your rail to hold on your board to make it around a section and stuff. And you really learned how to move your body in flow with the wave to maneuver that craft around that situation and move forward with it. And so, it was to the point where you'd be swimming and some of the old guys would be paddling out laughing at you. Ha, you lost your board. You won't do that again, will ya? It wasn't, you didn't get reprimanded for losing your board. It was used as a tool for education of, okay, well, you're not going to do that again, are you? Go grab your board and paddle back out. Now, with how popular surfing is in the lineup, I find that we really need to make sure that people are educated in the water of when you enter the water, you have places that there's going to be a lot of people there. And if you're swimming, be swimming in a place where you're meant to be swimming and acknowledge the rules of that particular beach, wherever you're at. But I think people, when you're learning to enter the ocean, you need to be educated about the ocean firstly, about how currents work, how waves work and everything like that, and understand how that particular beach is working where you go to, either to swim or to surf. Secondly, if you are going to partake in an aquatic wave craft riding, you learn how to use that craft in creeks, in the inside. Really work on those fundamental tools of board handling skills, of Eskimo rolling, and really learning how to hold on to your equipment and not depending on your leg rope to save you. Because for me, I have gotten so hurt by my own leg rope. Because when I surf over reef, which a lot of my trips were over reef, I had to wear a leg rope. And I've gotten pulling into closeouts or doing something, I've gotten so smacked by my own board. Where if I wasn't wearing a leg rope, it would have went in. But yes, obviously there was no one there. But I think that just more so right now, the issue is people just depending on their, not their skills, but equipment to save them. And I think it's a duty of people that are teaching to really make sure that people don't go out further until they learn how to use their boards and I mean really, and it's hard. You have to explain to people surfing is not easy. It is a really, really hard sport, and you have to really make sure that you use all 110 pounds of you to turn that board and hold on, wrap your feet around that board when you Eskimo roll. Don't just hold it lightly. And if it's going to pull you, don't let it go. And that's, I think, it really comes down to educating people how to handle their boards. And of course, everyone falls. I've fallen, I've surfed the pass a while ago and lost my board, and it wasn't so crowded, but still, I felt guilty. And so now, I started wearing a leg rope out of the past just recently, just because I don't want to hurt somebody if I do fall, because I will fall, and if I lose my board. But as well, now as that I'm a mother, I definitely would never, ever, ever forgive myself if I hit a little kid and hurt them. So if I go and surf someplace that's crowded, I'm making sure that I'm wearing a leg rope. And I hate it because I don't like the way it feels. But with how many people are in the water now and people not understanding the rules of the road or the rules of the waves, and people still wanting party waves and drop-ins or people turn and burn, that doesn't allow me the opportunity to surf my craft how I normally would. And so I don't want to be at fault of hurting someone else because of something that was an accident. So it's a really hard for me, where it was like no leg rope for my life. It was just like, I hate those things, to now with so many people in the water. It's a really hard thing because you're going to have people come at you from both ways. And I think right now, safety is the most important thing. I've had my skull fractured by my own surfboard. The amount of times that I've got fins in the legs and been hurt by it, like I can't imagine if it happened to a little kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a real tough topic, and I don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers because no one wants to ruffle feathers, but I just think it really comes back to making sure people educate themselves on how to hold on to their equipment. And if you don't know how to do it, ask someone. Go take a surf lesson and teach them how and learn where you're supposed to paddle out. Don't just think that you've done one lesson and you can go surf a real busy place too without a leg rope as well.
Or even with just certain places. I remember someone in Hawaii, one of the sort of enforcers on the North Shore back in the day, talking about why they would send people in at
the
pipe
whistle?
And backdoor, or that crowd, and because they were getting heat for it, and they would take some circumstances too far and with physical violence and stuff. But at the same time, one of his analogies he used was, if you saw a bunch of really good basketball players on a court in New York or something, and there's a little public court there that anyone could play basketball on. If you saw a group of people playing hoops and they were really, really good, and it was pretty high energy, and it's pretty easy to get bumped and grazed on the concrete real easy, you wouldn't just walk into the middle of that action being someone with far less ability. If you did, you would get bowled over really quick just by the nature of the play and the way people were moving there. And so he was like, look, some lineups are just like that. It is a high energy space. And to come into it fully expecting that, I've got access to this, I should be able to have a go at that, it's just not appropriate. And I liked that perspective, especially when it comes to places that are consequential like pipe or whatever. And it's a funny one when you have these shared lineups like point breaks, though, where a lot of point breaks have like a bottleneck effect, at the top. It's always the busiest at the top. Everyone sees every wave when you're paddling back out, and you just all get lured up to the top. And the top of every point around the world pretty much is the most powerful part of the point. It's where the wave strikes the sand first, and it's the deepest water to the shallowest water. They're high energy spots. And it's, you think of Snapper Rocks, you think of the Pass, those sort of waves, even point breaks in California. And so looking at things like that too is really, to me, it's interesting just to understand that there are just areas where it's just really inappropriate to be if you don't have the skill for that specific kind of wave and dynamic.
But what about if we get rid of everyone who's learning, takes a surf lesson, surfs the inside, surfs a different spot? In this particular part of the world, we'll still have a high density top of the point because of the caliber of surfing here. There are a lot of really capable surfers who wear leg ropes. How do we move forward in having a better vibe in the water, a safer vibe in the water? How do we move forward out of this place that we're in right now, where you were saying, Belen, before, that people are really frustrated?
Yeah. You know what? I think that if people remember that, firstly, this is supposed to be fun. Surfing is supposed to be fun. And it's really frustrating for some people if they aren't educated about the right equipment for the type of wave that they're paddling out at as well. They can get quite frustrated. I think that education, honestly, I think right now it's a point in educating people about when you paddle out. There's a really good, if you guys ever want to speak to her, is Sarah Robertson. She's one of your really great longboarders from Australia here. She's written a piece called The Mindful Surfer, and it's a really good piece about what it is to be a mindful surfer in the water and on land. And when you paddle into the lineup, and this is all from her I'm quoting now, when you paddle into the lineup, first paddle out and say hi to people. Understand, scope the water out. Who's surfing really good? Who's check it all out. Say hi to people, relax, learn, look and see, and as well, wait your turn. And a lot of people don't understand about, well, when is it my turn? And that comes back again to educating and learning about how waves work, what priority is like, what a drop-in is like, where you take off, and as well the type of wave that you're going to go for. Again, that all, for me, comes back to educating, but people really understanding surfing is not for people, especially when they're beginning, it's not the quantity of waves. And that's what I try to tell my ladies, is like, sometimes I paddle out and I only catch like 2 waves in an hour. And it's not a lot of waves, but they're quality waves and it's satisfying. And sometimes that's really all you need. But we need to educate them not to be that wave hog out there, because if one person paddles out, male or female, and they do the wrong thing out in the lineup, they're going to leave an impression out in that water. And so the next either male or female that paddles out, and that person that had that bad experience and impression of the person prior to them, they're going to have that bad taste in their mouth. And so that
becomes contagious, doesn't it?
And that innocent person that's just paddled out, it's just going to cop it. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like a flow-on effect. So it's really comes down to people knowing the right place, the right time, and as well when to, okay, I've had enough. Like, and I think people don't realize that, you've had 20 waves. Is that enough or is that not enough? And some people are like, I'm going to go out and catch 100
Never
waves.
enough.
I know. And for me, when I was younger, I was like, oh my God, I just want to catch you. And I could pull 4-hour sessions, but I would wait my turn.
Parenthood was a real game changer.
Oh, well, that's
for me in terms of satiation from very little.
Oh yeah. But that's the heaviest hood you could ever get into right there, motherhood. But yeah, that's just my perception of the lineups right now. Is I think people just really need to learn that this is supposed to be fun. Educate yourself about how to handle your equipment. Make sure you're on the right equipment, and as well, say hi to the people who have put the time and effort, and respect your elders. I think it's super important that we really acknowledge the women and the men that are out there that have been surfing that lineup for a long time. When you see a woman that's paddled out and she's, older, or a man, think about how long it probably took him to get out of bed, put his wetsuit on, paddled out, and just sit there. It's probably hard for him. So give him a break. Parents, educate your kids about how hard it is to surf and to respect elder people, and as well wait their turn. And I know I've got a 9-year-old who just wants to go out and have fun and doesn't take into account the big picture of things. But I think everyone has education of the right thing to do in the water. I think it's going to take a while for the frustration level because there's just so many people in the water now.
And you're right at the forefront of this, Belen, because the lineup on the Gold Coast and surrounding areas that gets the overflow from that very full cup is pretty much the busiest and most competitive zone in the surfing world, universe even. Like it is, I think what's happening there, especially Snap Rocks and D-Bar and those sort of places, is just chronic. It's like it's perhaps Chris just came visiting from overseas and he was sitting out there and couldn't even catch a wave and was just watching what you had to do, get a wave, and the kind of person you had to be to catch a wave. And he said it's just the gnarliest, Chris Del Moro, the gnarliest lineups in the world for that. So I guess we're further along the path of this where we can learn from what's going on here and then other places around the world that are slowly building. Their crowds are getting bigger and bigger because everyone wants to have a surfing life because it's so great. They'll hopefully learn from what we're experiencing and how we can do better and be better to each other.
Belen, I really like your suggestion to err on the side of kindness, to make eye contact, to say hello. I think that can do a lot. There's this culture in Australia, and maybe it's everywhere now, especially at the more, I want to say, masculine lineups of averting your eyes, not making eye contact, not acknowledging other people's humanity around you. And this perpetuates this greedy, solo, I'm here to get mine attitude. Whereas when you sit and you make eye contact with someone and you say good day, and you look at them and you can see sadness in their eyes, or they're having a hard time, or they're feeling a bit afraid, and suddenly they're a human being. Most of us want to feel helpful and maybe gift a wave or, be there for that person. I'm curious at this point in time, how do we move from the very patriarchal, violent, aggressive style of lineup management that we were in, 50, 40, 30, even still at some breaks today, but how do we rightfully move beyond that? And what do we institute as an alternative to punching fins out? How do we move beyond that as a culture in a way that we'll be proud for our kids to be part of this culture?
I think that communication is the most important thing. And I just think that there's a lack of. I'll be in the water and you'll see people just get really frustrated. And instead of going up and speaking to the person and educating them, being like, hey, what you did was wrong. And this is why, but educating them in a way, because most of the time it's an accident and someone hasn't been educated about what they've done. And because they've watched a YouTube video or they've friends like, come on, let's play, so they don't know anything. They don't know the rules of the road. And so for me, I just, if I'm out surfing and I've had an experience where someone's done something, I will try to paddle up to them and be like, hey, I'm so stoked. And I try it in the real part. And I know it's really hard for some people, but try and like, hey, how amazing is this? Like, I know you might not have thought what you just did was wrong or right or whatever, but just so you know, this is how it should be done because X, Y, and Z. Or explain it to them in a not aggressive way, because people are already intimidated in the water as it is. So many people don't even feel like they belong in the lineup, and so when they do something and they've done it not how it's supposed to be done, it's a full-on roll of effect. But if you can take a breath, go educate them, they probably won't do it again. But when you come and you do it in an aggressive manner, people's ears just turn off. I learned this from my child. If you talk to him aggressively, he doesn't listen to you. And he's like, okay, cool. What did you say? And then he does it again. But for me, just paddling out, the ocean brings out all of your emotions. Any issues you've got going on in your personal life, any fears you have, the ocean has a tendency to bring it out. And I see this with my women that are surfing. And it's just as much as like, are you okay? Do you need help? Can I help you? Can I give you some tips? Because if we all just give a little bit of kindness and, again, unsolicited advice to someone, you could really make your surfing session better, but you'll make their surfing session even better. And that's what surfing is. It is a tribal thing. And I think if we go back to the days of, like you hear Rel when she was alive, talk about surfing and, get a wave, give a wave, and quality over quantity, and, the spreading of aloha, because this is where we connect. This is the one place we all come because we feel this is our safe zone. Make sure that you make it safe and fun and kind, because the world is so hard. We don't need to have that much hardness in a place that's supposed to be so much fun. So I just think that we need to, be kinder in the water.
That's so true.
That's
Thank you, Belen.
put too.
One of the things that I love about you is it's so obvious that you came from a lived experience of a real community, a real functioning community where people helped one another, supported one another. You had an intact family. We get to experience people like that every once in a while, and you can really feel the difference from, I grew up in Florida with a single mama, and we didn't really have much of an extended family. We didn't have any extended family there, really. We didn't have the kind of community that I'm talking about until I started surfing. And so I'm just so grateful that our culture gets to have injections of people like you who remember what it means to be part of a community, what it requires of us to step up and take responsibility. That real community requires that. And I just think you've been a real gift to my surfing life and to our surfing culture. So thank you for that.
Oh, you know what? The beautiful thing about the community, and it's not just in the surf community, it extends out to other sports as well, is you find your tribe. You know, for me, going through the experiences as I did as a young girl, really wanting to surf and not wanting to be like, again, the stereotypical of growing up, you know, how I did, allowed me to pave a way for my two younger sisters who, again, went out of what the norm was. You know, my middle sister, she's a really good skateboarder. She's, you know, good pool skateboarder, good vert skateboarder. And my little sister ended up becoming a pro skater. And she was like one of the best female street skaters in the world. And she was sponsored, traveling the world, like everything. And all the struggles that I went through as a child, the best way I can explain from my growing up was like, my mom said it to me one time. She's like, Belen, you know, with her little accent, it was like you just got dropped in a jungle and you had a machete and you had to just like create your own path because no one was creating it for you in this family. You wanted to get somewhere and you had to cut all those barriers down to get to where you got to. She's like, but what you don't realize, what you did not only for yourself as you started walking through this jungle, but you left a path for your sisters to follow and your cousins to follow. So because of going out on a limb, it showed some of my extended families that they could do other things in sport. Like, so I've got one of my cousins, his name is Vincent Alvarez. He's like a ridiculous street skater, like professional skater as well. And it's pretty cool to see what someone going out on a limb out of drive can create. And I guess that's where, for me, it can transition to the surfing community as well. It's like when you're learning, make sure you do it right, but as well remember that people are going to follow your path however you are in the water. So how you behave in the water, how you act in the water, people see that and they'll emulate it, and they'll follow what you're doing and try to be like you. So make sure that you're setting good examples, because one day it's going to be your kid in the water. Or one day it'll be like your friend in the water that's going to experience the things, and how you behave in the water ultimately is going to affect not only you, but everyone else. So every time you step into that water, think, you know, how do I want to set the scene in this lineup for the energy that I'm going to bring to it? Because you can either bring good energy to it or you can bring bad energy to it, walking into it and leaving it better than how it was, you know? And that's how I think it should be with people's lives in general. When you go to the beach, leave it cleaner than what you found it. You know, when you plant something, make sure you fertilize it so that it grows better than it would have normally. You know, when you teach a child something, teach them something that's going to help them be a better human. And for me, it really, again, the word education comes back. Just educate how to be a good person in and out of the water.
Thanks so much for listening with us today. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing an episode with a friend. Our editor this season is the multi-talented Ben Alexander. The podcast soundtrack was composed by Shannon Sol Carroll, with additional tunes by Dave and Ben. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcasts, and you can subscribe to our very infrequent newsletter to get book recommendations, questions we're pondering, behind-the-scenes glimpses into recording the podcast, and more via our website, waterpeoplepodcast.com.